OpenAI will hit some sort of minimum viable kind of what's good enough for everyone. You're never going to make money filling in the gaps in the platform. I liken what we're going through right now like the beginning of the internet. It's very big what's happening to both our world of customer service, technology in general. We don't have the luxury of sitting back and watching. There's going to be a lot of winners and losers, and there's going to be a lot of market share up for grabs. And people are going to be looking for who's got the good shit.
If you are CEO of Google, what would you change?
I kind of hate what I'm about to say. I'd be...
Des, I am so excited for this. Dude, when we did our last one, I remember it was the first one to break an hour and 15. And I was like, fuck, the reasons, like this show is why I love doing what I do. And I'd love to do it in person. So I'm thrilled that you're here in person.
I'm happy to be here. I love London. And it's awesome to actually do this in person and see the three-dimensional Harry.
Most people are like, wow, you're actually quite old. I'm like, thank you. Yeah, age is this kind of strange thing that happens. Before we dive in, Des, what did you want to be when you were younger? When you were growing up in Ireland as a kid, what did you want to be?
I think it was either a professional video games tester, but I kind of knew that wasn't a career, or at least it definitely wasn't in the 80s. Sports journalist. I loved soccer and I loved writing. So I really wanted to like write about soccer. I just thought like if I could do that, that would be like genuinely the easiest job. I used to actually do it. I used to like, I'd watch a game and I'd write down my match report and I'd get my mum to read it and she'd be like, that's very good. I was just passionate about like, I think I love soccer, watching it, and then I literally love writing as well. And I loved like, I'd always read all of the cover to cover, every sports newspaper, everything, just trying to get a sense of what's the language, how you're supposed to talk, all that sort of stuff.
When your mother's like, you know, it's amazing, darling, I'm always like, oh, thanks, mum.
Yeah, well, totally. I mean, thankfully I didn't end up doing that because I have friends who are sports journalists and it doesn't pay as well as I thought it might.
You know what, it's better to do software. But Intercom, just for those that don't know, how did it come to be?
It actually started life inside a different product, believe it or not. We had a different product called Exceptional. We wanted to talk to our customers. So the logo for Exceptional sat in the bottom right-hand corner of the product. And one day, it had a little speech bubble that came out of it. And it was like, hey, probably something like, hey, we're sorry that we fell over or the server wasn't working last weekend or something like that. And that was kind of like the beginning of like, that was a much better workflow to have that bubble pop than the old world. The old world, if you some of your viewers might be old enough to remember, would have been you get a database export, you import that into MailChimp or Campaign Monitor or something like that. You sync it like with PayPal because there was no Stripe to work out who were on a paid subscription. Bear in mind, PayPal didn't know anything about SaaS. It just thought these were subscriptions. So you'd have to work out who was paying. You'd import all that information. You'd send out the mail to say like, hey, here's some pre-announced downtime, or more likely some apologizing for some downtime we didn't know was coming. And then you get a shitload of replies in your personal email. It was crap. And then with Intercom, it was like one day, it was like, why do we just talk inside the product? And like another sort of inspiration for us was we were working out of a coffee shop called 3FE in Dublin at the time. And the dude who was building 3FE, this new recurring software business, or recurring subscription business, if you like where he's selling coffee every day to the same people, he was talking to people. He was, hey, I've got a new blend in. Do you want to try it out? Or like, hey, is your latte nice? Or whatever. He was getting like real-time in-context feedback. Although in his head, he was just running a coffee shop. But for us, we felt really like divorced from our users. There was no obvious way. Like in our heads, we're sitting here in Dublin, Ireland. They're all in San Francisco. Like there was a single street in San Francisco where we had more customers than we did in all of Ireland, to give an example of the gap. But what we realized pretty quickly was it wasn't a unique problem to us because we were in Dublin. Everyone who runs software businesses wanted to be closer to wanted to have that personal connection. So we started to like iterate on this idea of like maybe users should be able to talk back. Maybe you should choose who you send a message to. Maybe you should see who saw the message and who hasn't seen it yet. And maybe the user should be able to start conversations. And that ultimately became what we call like the customer communication platform, Intercom. And then today we call it like an AI first customer service platform because it's kind of been 10 years and we've matured our thinking a lot. But yeah, that's how it started.
I mean, and also it has to be AI first, right? I mean,
yeah, you'd be an idiot not to be.
Why would you not be doing that?
Yeah, I'm sure coffee shops are AI first too as well.
Can I ask, man, how do you feel about everyone being like AI first? Like we see it as a media company, obviously. Every single kind of large scale up and growth company is like AI first. And they're kind of throwing on, and you actually tweeted that brilliant picture.
We're going to end up talking about AI for a while now, so I'll just start off. I think it's largely bullshit if the basic tech stack hasn't actually changed that much. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're a project management tool, all right? And like, hey, what is project management? It's like tasks, deadlines, files, approvals, decisions, communication, whatever. It's not like really obvious to me that AI is going to like take away a lot of that, because like you're planning out projects, and like oftentimes these aren't like, these are like things that really have to happen, whether it's like you're building a house or you're managing a rebrand for a client or something like that. There's a lot of like human decision and judgment made. It's not obvious to me where the AI kicks in, and so if you're like an AI first version of Basecamp, I still think that looks like Basecamp, and maybe they just find areas to sprinkle in AI to speed up little bits and pieces here and there. Maybe not. I think if you take, say, the area of customer support, everything about customer support is going to be affected by AI. For example, summarizing an issue is a very common workflow that has to happen. Replying to a customer based on the fact you found in a knowledge base is a very common thing that has to happen. Consolidating different articles to give a conclusive answer to something, being conversational, these are all things that AI can do. So I think if you were to build a customer support solution today, you'd build it totally different than, say, when Zendesk was started in 2007 or 2008 or whatever. Like, I think the world of like ticketing and structure and state and like, we'll get back to you in 72 hours and all that, that's all gone. So I think like to your question about AI, I just think it's bullshit when actually the job is identical and you're just sprinkling on like salt and pepper a bit of AI here and there. And I think it's true when it's like, shit, we need to reimagine this entire space.
Can I push back and just say that, do you think not, if you think about like an Asana or a Monday.com or whatever, they could actually connect to your Google Mail accounts, your calendars, and actually create a huge amount of tasks or be more proactive in terms of how you spend your time, or actually be part of the creation of your to-do list, which is much more than just like a sprinkler. Like, I'm just pushing back saying, I think it's so foundational that it could actually be that instrumental to almost everything.
I think that's true. And when that happens, I'll support them saying it's AI first. But that hasn't happened yet. Right now, we're firmly into like salt and pepper category, in my opinion. But you are correct. Like, if the job of like, managing a project involves like reading email, checking tasks, looking at GitHub commits to see if something got approved or not, checking off tasks and corresponding with a calendar and seeing when things are, and using all that information to take action or to request action, then if somebody builds like the project megabot that can do all that, I will celebrate them. I'll invest in their company. I'll call them like an AI first project management solution. But we're not there yet.
I mean this respectfully. You mentioned Zendesk there in terms of like it's difficult to integrate when you have the stack that is like theirs. Intercom's is not like theirs, but you're not starting from nothing today where you have a complete clean slate.
Yeah.
Is it not still really freaking hard for you then?
One area where we have been fortunate is we were all in on messaging from the very start. So like from the very start, we had this idea of like an actual messenger, like, WhatsApp style messenger embedded in the product. That's where chatbots live. They don't live in tickets. So like if you think about like the idea of a chatbot is actually the intersection of two mega trends. It's like AI and it's messaging. That's what makes a chatbot. So I think we were in a very fortuitous position to have a complete sort of CS platform and have as our core mode of interaction actual messaging back and forth. We obviously support ticketing and all these other things, but like our core way people know of Intercom is the little floating bubble in the messenger. So I think we were in pole position to do it. There wasn't a substantial rebuild because for a start, we had our first AI product was built in 2016 called Resolution Bot. So we have already been scratching at this, but a lot of those like bots kind of went through different eras, if you like.
I remember 2016 exactly. When I was in the Valley and all anyone wanted for a month was
precisely
chatbots.
Yeah, and Facebook had their big demo of and all that. Like I think we basically went from like bots that were just literally if this then that logic, which is like kind of like very IVR style bots. Like if Harry says one, then we take them down path one, right? The next generation of bots were like what I would call like fuzzy AI, which is like we're going to take Harry's message, and if it looks like he's asking about pricing, we'll give him the pricing answer, right? And that generally had broader coverage because it was an attempt to be conversational, but actually a lot of times just pissed people off because the fuzzy logic wasn't good enough. And you still had to go and build all of these if this then that rules. You just had the magic AI inferred piece. Where we are today is like generationally different, which is the LLM era, which is we know what Harry's talking about and we can infer it and we can actually work out the specific question and find the precise answer. So I think that's the sort of era that we're living in today. And like so we have moved through the gears on this. Like we had like inbound custom bots, we had resolution bot, and now we're sitting here with Finn. And I think this, like, the numbers for Finn alone kind of justify the confidence.
I think a lot of investors discredit a lot of companies today and say, well, they're just actually kind of thin layers on top of LLMs. And actually there's very little value accrual in that space.
Yeah.
And really what makes them different. Not many people are creating their own LLMs. So 90% are sitting on top or 99% are sitting on top. And respectfully, are you not just sitting on top? And what makes it any like value accrual there? It's the data that we have from Intercom's existing historical.
So There's a few different ways to come at that. I think the first thing...
Can I just interrupt and ask, is that a bullshit VCism that like, oh, it's a thin layer on top, so it's not very valuable?
I think it depends on what you're actually talking about. Like, there's a big difference between a feature and a product. If you wanted to say build a chatbot that does customer support, it is true that like, and there's been a lot of these like sort of wrappers where give a URL, answer a question, right? That's pretty easy to build. It's like half a day's worth of work, and you're sitting and you're wholly dependent on OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever it is you could go for it. There's a massive difference between that and say something that like a large company would actually deploy to its customers, which, you know, ingests knowledge bases, requests, refreshes, reports on itself, reports on customer satisfaction, you know, like, you know, can parse, you know, multiple conversations, can understand customer context and feed that in, knows the difference between a premium user and a free user and gives context to where answers, whatever. Like there's a wave upon wave of extra stuff you have to build in. Like that's before we get to like permissioning, controlling and targeting and making sure that some users don't see bots and some users only see bots. And like all of that is like the extra stuff you have to build to turn what's like a thin, how would you say, like science fair tech demo into an actual like, fully commercialized product. So I think like to the VC argument of like a thin wrapper, I think if it is a thin wrapper, it's a bullshit argument. But if you take say like some people are building on top of say DALL-E or something like that, right? Literally, it depends. You can build a Canva style product on top of DALL-E where you've got like digital asset management, you've got controlled and approved images, you've got workflows that support all that, you've got embed functions, you've got usage functions, reporting and analytics, or you can build the thin wrapper. And there's just a massive difference between those two. And I think that's like what people miss when they make the argument is like, there's also such a thing, I guess, as a very thick wrapper. And the thick wrapper is like when you've actually solved the user's problem end to end fully in a way that OpenAI never will, you know.
What does that look like then? Sorry, if we think about like the thick wrapper and we unpack that, what is required to be a thick wrapper?
I think you have to solve all aspects of the user's workflow. You have to fit into their tech stack and integrate where you need to integrate. You need to like solve for like, when I say all aspects of the workflow, I mean like in like the hypothetical like DALL-E wrapper, like you need to solve you know, feedback on various images, and maybe there's a bit of a collaboration on the client side where they want to discuss things. Maybe there's like prompt version control to see what we can generate. Maybe there's an approval workflow. Maybe there's like, and then you're into like asset management after that. And then maybe there's hosting, maybe there's embedding, all that sort of stuff. And then there's a reporting on usage. Like how many times is this displayed, and like you know, does it, you know, if it's a marketing product, maybe like does it correlate, or like does it test well with like conversions, or does it not convert when we use it or whatever? Like that to me is like all of the shit that you would want around a tool if you're going to say like this is Canva but AI first, if you know what I mean. I think if somebody goes and builds all that and makes it make sense, the dude around the corner who's got like the thin wrapper, like he's got a lot of shit to build, you know. So I just think you're then back into I would call like maybe the classic B2B arms race maybe, but like it's those who really understand the user workflow are the ones who will actually win this, not those who kind of like, you know, straighten their glasses and say academically that's been possible for 7 months now. It's like, great, mate, but like people actually need to buy real software and use it for real things.
I think the hard thing for me is like, given the horizontal application of like what a lot of OpenAI is doing enables to, when you look at the releases that they made the other day, there are a lot of applications, to be fair, like, I don't know, prosumer wealth management. Yeah, you would never have thought like, oh, OpenAI is going to build a deep set of tools for them. Well, actually, like a lot of their changes meant that most of those companies that have been innovating in the last year have just been killed overnight.
I think that's probably true, but what I would say is, again, go back to the thin wrapper, thick wrapper. Like if what you've built is like the wealth management advisor bot, you're dead. Right, like as in it's going to be like an actual one of the GPTs that's just going to be available, right? If instead you've built something that, you know, connects to your Robinhood or your eToro, connects to your bank account, monitors your wealth, your exposure, you know, issues you case by case advice, monitors the markets for you. Like again, thick wrapper, like does the actual things you have to do to manage somebody's wealth, and can have a conversation with you about like and suggest actions and next best steps. That's still, I would say, substantially beyond like what OpenAI would ever do. You have to bear in mind, like a parallel here might be like, look at what iOS ships with, right? It ships with a basic notes app. If you want a really fancy one, off you go, and you can go and buy Reflect or Bear or something like that. Like it ships with a basic camera. If you want Photo Room, you have to go and buy Photo Room. It's like you have to understand, like OpenAI will hit some sort of minimum viable, like kind of what's good enough for everyone. You're never going to make money filling in the gaps in a platform, the thing they haven't gotten around to yet. Like I described that as like you're on a train tracks picking up, you know, euros or dollar coins or whatever. There's a train coming. It's going to hit you at some stage. It doesn't matter how rich you get. That thing's hitting you, right? However, I think if you find an area where they're not going to go that deep, OpenAI is never going to put like 5 of their engineers going hard on wealth management and like, banking integrations, so like that's the thing, like that's you pick an area and you say, let's do all of it. Let's just do a little tech demo science fair. Let's nail the use case,
No, I totally agree with you. Can I ask, when we think about kind of, that train hitting you, a lot of people suggest the commoditization of LLMs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that as an argument? And when we're seeing more and more upstarts coming, like your Mistrals from France. Do you think we will see the commoditization of LLMs?
I mean, it would suit me if we did.
Why would it suit you if it did?
Because then there'd be no pricing power, and then we could actually base we could base Fin on a far cheaper thing, and it would increase margin. Another alternative would be if there was an actual best one, but like the best CS, the best LLM for customer support requires hundreds of millions of customer support conversations. That would suit me too, because then we'd have it. We could train it uniquely.
Why does Intercom not? I understand the heavy expenditure and the heavy R&D.
I mean, you kind of just answered the question there. Like, why do we not train our own LLM?
Yeah.
Officially, I just say like no comment. Like maybe we are. But like the reason
I love you so much, Des.
the reason we might not is the reasons you would suggest, and the reason we might is the reasons I just suggested a second ago. It's like it's there's a dynamic there.
I totally get you, and thank you for that brilliant answer. So, do you think that they will continue to be commoditized?
I don't know if it's actually happened yet. If I'm clear, right? Like right now, at least to like when we look at like how best to do the Fin thing, which is to like and we see staggering results for Fin. Some people are getting like very, very high percentage of total support volume resolved with satisfaction, like above 50% at times, right? Like I won't, we'll do a proper roundup of numbers soon and we'll share properly, but like it's staggering at times, right? So all we care about is like who can do Fin the best for us, and we actually torture test all of the LLMs. It's not yet the case that they're all equal. I think they're all equal for like, what's the weather like, or like how are you today, or
what were your lessons from torture testing all of them?
The torture testing is like really about like, so it's really important that Fin stays on topic. So if you ask Fin,
for those that don't know, Fin is
our AI chatbot that sits inside the Intercom Messenger, and it will have conversations with your users and help them answer the support questions so that your support team don't have to. We generally remove all of the undifferentiated heavy lifting that a support team might have to do, and we do a lot beyond that as well. Some of the more complex queries will also get fully resolved by Fin. Fin also sits in your inbox and helps your support team. So if a day one support rep doesn't know the answer, they can ask Fin, and Fin will give them the answer too. Yeah. And Fin is effectively, it's a product by Intercom that uses an LLM. It uses GPT-4 by OpenAI. Uh-huh. When it comes to like picking the model, the requirements we have are, one is like trustworthiness. So like we need to be able to prompt it in such a way that it will not hallucinate, knowing that prompting will occasionally cost us a valid answer, but it's really important to our customers that all the answers Fin says are like high confidence. A second thing is that it has to stay on topic. So we don't want Fin taking opinions on current events. So if you go to like a bank website and you say, hey, who's the president and are they doing a good job? A bank's customer support has no official policy on that, and Fin better not either, right? So there's a lot of like staying on topic that is really, really important. And then there's like just depth and power of quality of conversation. So we have a set of metrics that we kind of look at, and we configure and tweak our prompts and tune as much as we can to get it as good as we can. And right now, like we're like in with OpenAI, and we sit on GPT-4, and it's against that logic I say that.
And when you compared OpenAI to the alternative providers, what did the test show you?
There's no there's no hard criteria I could offer you, like 63% in this and blah, blah. It's basically the quality of conversation. Does it fail any of our like hallucination tests? Does it fail any of our like trustworthiness tests? Can it infer its own confidence? So Fin will sometimes say the answer is yes, and sometimes they'll say, based on reading this article, the answer looks like yes, but have a read yourself. And sometimes they'll say, I don't know. We care about the ability to do each of those things.
Was it close though, or was there a wide?
Close and narrowing, and like it's also a work in progress. Like all of these things are moving targets, right? There are better capability. Obviously, we have been moving very fast in this space. Fin launched, I think, in June, maybe July. It was in a sort of beta for 3 months prior to that. A lot happened since then. So like we haven't even gotten around to maybe testing the latest and greatest of all the providers, which are increasing in number. You mentioned Mistral, there's also a Glama, there's Anthropic, there's a Cohere, like there's like a whole chunk of them. And it's a bit of work to go around and constantly be trying to find out, has anyone got, we only really care about better, right? Right now, we're not in cost optimization mode. We're just like, who's got the best?
Well, it's so interesting you said there about that, because I'm going to think of like an AI LLM testing team.
Yeah.
But Alex, who I had on the show from Nabla in Paris,
Right.
he was like, the companies that win will be those that are able to transition between LLMs most seamlessly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's, well, I don't know if I agree with the sentence, but I think it's a really important attribute to be able to transition from one LLM to another. Because if somebody does unlock new power, you'll want to be able to use it very quickly. I don't know. I think winning involves more than just simply being agnostic about your LLM.
I feel more and more like kind of Joe Rogan in terms of not knowing the answer and asking quite base questions. My question to you is, can you not just use like 7 different types? And what I mean by that is you're like, OpenAI is great for the high regulatory clients that need precise, perfect answers every time. But actually then Anthropic is better for...
Yeah. All the way down to your homegrown cheapest one. Or
exactly.
Even within OpenAI's ecosystem, you can use GPT-4 Turbo, GPT-4, GPT 3.5 Turbo. And like they cost different amounts, and like they're good at their some of them are faster than others, some of them are more accurate than others. So like, yeah.
What's been the hardest thing about kind of the integration with OpenAI?
Just the moving target is like, and it's not a bad thing. They move incredibly fast. We can grow a lot of confidence in a particular direction, and then they can unlock new capabilities. And we're like, oh, I guess we should jump on this instead. That's definitely one of the challenges. Like we have a great partnership with them, but like their team moves, like our team moves fast, but they're like throwing out new capabilities regularly. So
does it feel like the kind of unnerving, bluntly, being moved in that way by an external team?
We are all in on AI, so we just have to be the best providers of AI for customer service. So it's not really an option. Like if and when the world stabilizes a bit, like I suspect we're still in this S curve, we're still in the spike. There will be a plateau eventually, right? Where, hey, most of the main problem areas have been fleshed out and we're starting to get a bit more sober now. I think that's when we can move into like a different mode of work. But for as long as like, our whole team watched Tuesday's Dev Day by OpenAI, again, it was like, let's get to work. Like there's new stuff here. There's new things. Customers are going to have questions. We need answers. We need to have opinions. We might change the roadmap. I don't consider it so much dependent on OpenAI. I consider it dependent on like the boom time of AI that we're in, full stop. I liken what we're going through right now to like the beginning of the internet. It's very big what's happening to both our world of customer service, technology in general, and society in general. We don't have the luxury of sitting back and watching. I think if we were like a massive like government sanctioned monopoly, we could be like, let's just sit this one there for 3 years and see what happens.
Yeah.
Whereas in practice, I think this is much more like, hey, there's going to be a lot of winners and losers, and there's going to be a lot of market share up for grabs over the next 2 to 3 years, and people are going to be looking for who's got the good shit, and that needs to be Intercom.
I have so many questions to ask. First one I have to ask is like, you mentioned bluntly, obviously the team watching, the announcements. How does the structure of the team change when you move from Intercom V1 or the previous gen of Intercom to Intercom AI first, innovation AI? Yeah. Do you change the structure of the team?
The way we're working today still is that we have a central AI team led by Fergal, who's our VP of AI. They work on Fin. They work on the core question and answer model of Fin. They work on let's just say other areas of Intercom that we want to apply AI to that we aren't ready to talk about, I guess. They also work on things like what's their best LLM to use, etc. And then they work on what we call Horizon 2 stuff, which is most of what they do, we're pretty sure is going to work. But Horizon 2 is this could be a total brick wall we run into, but we need to try, because if it's not a brick wall, we need to be the first ones to realize that. So it's very centralized, and they effectively have breakthroughs, and they go and partner with product teams who might own Fin or might own the inbox or might own the reporting engine. And they say, hey, we just realized, given this, we can do that. Does that seem like something your customers would use? And they partner with the product manager, the EM and designer, and they say, right, here's a new capability. Literally, there's a new capability that did not exist before. This is literal breakthrough shit. Can you see a way to use that in your world? And most of the time the answer is yes. So then we're right, how does that rank and stack in the roadmap against everything else our customers want?
How much of resources are allocated to R&D and AI today?
R&D and Intercom is about, these numbers always catch me up, but I'm going to say it's between 350 and 400 people or somewhere in that space. And then how many are AI? I want to say
what percent is that? I'm just intrigued.
Of the company?
Yeah.
We're 900 people. So
wow.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah. Is that shit big or small?
That's big.
Yeah. I mean, we're a technology company.
What was it a year ago?
Slightly less, I'd say. Slightly less. We'd just gone through a riff, and And I guess AI hadn't happened, AI literally, like we're coming around to the anniversary at time of recording, right? But like we've always believed that like the best product wins. We've always invested hard in product. And then on your AI question, I said like it's, I think we anticipate growing the team to maybe 50 or so.
You said about being akin to the start of the internet.
Yeah.
At the start of the internet, a lot of people lost money and a lot of the projects didn't work out.
This is your famous tweet you're going to defend again, isn't it?
No, I'm purely asking, do we think 90% of VC dollars going into AI startups today will go to zero?
Do you have a sense of what percentage normally goes to zero?
To zero? I mean, it depends what data sets you take. People think it's a lot more than they actually are. I think traditionally to zero is about 55%.
Okay.
There's like, 30% make between 0 and 1x.
Yeah.
And then there's like 15% that make more than 1x.
I think it's reasonable to assume in this massive sea of uncertainty that we're in, with like the compute being so expensive, the margins being so thin, that a higher than normal amount of these startups will die for one of the following reasons. They are at a thin layer and they get wiped by an OpenAI upgrade. Right, similar to remember in the early days of the iPhone, it was there was a torch app and there was a copy and paste app, and
totally.
All these things just got slapped once iOS started shipping. Right, it was I guess
we
people
still
want
see
that.
Now.
Yeah, it's still Sherlocking they call it. So I think there'll be more than that than there would be say in ye old B2B SaaS or whatever. Right, so I think that's going to be one cause of increased fatality for startups. I think a second one will just be margin compression. The B2B SaaS model, LTV CAC dynamics, and all that sort of stuff. It does have some assumption in there of 80 to 90% margins. Maybe 70 to 90% margin is kind of what you expect if you're running like an Asana or something like that. So if all of a sudden all your core workflows are now powered by reasonably expensive API calls that it's not yours, then all the money in the front door is going straight out the back door. And I think it was Shamat had this phrase, and he said in 2018, 2019, giving $1 to a startup was just a really lossy way of giving it through to Amazon, Facebook, or Google for hosting or acquisition. It's arguable in a lot of cases, 22, 23, 24, giving $1 to a startup is just a lossy way of giving it to OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever, because that's who they're basically taking it and shining it up and handing it onto. So I think that's going to be a second cause of increased startup mortality. But beyond that, I think the normal dynamics will play. And then the other piece is just in that world, let's say an above average number of these new investments do die. I also think an above average number of existing incumbents are going to die too, because their world is going to get torn apart by AI. There's a lot of tools out there that won't make sense in a world of AI.
Sorry, like what?
You have to take a slightly more future-facing look for this. But let me just describe to you a tool that I know exists. I just don't want to name it because I don't want to tell my friend that their startup's dead. Let's say it's an ad optimization startup, right? So you log in and it looks at all your AdWords and it tells you which ones are performing and which ones aren't, and you can generate new ads and all that sort of stuff. And it does that across Google and LinkedIn and Facebook or whatever, right? And people log in every day and they generate different versions of the winners and they turn off the losers, and they look for the LTV CAC optimum performers, and they splice those out into variants and run tests, and they produce a dashboard to show that they're doing their job and they're maximizing the spend of the advertising. What bit of that do you think AI can't do? AI can generate, if you give it one ad and you say, give me 10 versions of this, it'll do it. If you ask, give me 10 versions of this with a visual that's left aligned and a tagline that's on the right, can you run it? Ping the API server to put it live? Can you perhaps tell me, is it performing or not? Can you sort the list by LTV CAC? Can you calculate LTV CAC? Can you produce versions of the winners and turn off the losers? Can you produce a dash? What's the reason to log into that product?
I agree totally, but I'm just pushing back on you because if you actually have a product in that space which does end-to-end workflow from creation to distribution to monitoring to review, is that not the whole workflow that you suggested earlier was defensible? But I agree with you, all of that workflow is just gone.
That workflow is not defensible because what the humans are doing is totally, genuinely automatable. There's no actual human intuition or deduction or whatever being applied in that case. Let's say digital asset management, right? The example I gave at the outset of the podcast, I was talking about we're going to do brand advertising campaigns or whatever. The assumption in that workflow is that the human opinion does matter and that people actually do care about what their logo looks like or whatever, right? If they don't care and they're happy to have it picked algorithmically, yeah, that whole thing goes. But there are definitely going to be full workflows end to end that no longer matter. because every step is just an if this then that style application of thinking, right? As in, it's not anyone's opinion which is the most LTV CAC positive ad. It's effectively likely to be of low value, to have human differentiation in picking the winner, or even perhaps producing the variance. Maybe the greatest thing I'd say as to why there'll be a lot of startup mortality is that, like, if you and me were to start this ad optimization startup today, would it look anything like the previous tool that's built? Or put it another way, if we were allowed rob any of their code, would we? And I think in a lot of cases where like you'll see the full disruption, the answer is no. You'd build the product totally different today. But then there are some cases, for example, let's say we said we're going to build MailChimp, but here's our thing. We're going to use AI for the composer, so you can just tab to complete sentences or something like that, right? What I would say to you is, okay, is there an opportunity there? Well, here's the problem. To be a MailChimp, you need to be able to send millions of emails. That's a massive challenge for like sender reliability, reputation. You need to be able to do attribution on which links get clicked so you can produce reporting and all that sort of stuff. You need to do, let's say, partnerships. You need to like, connect with like Squarespace and Wix and all that sort of shit. Like you need to have an embeddable subscriber widget, all that shit, right? We have to go and build all that and our little bit of AI on the composer, like that lets you complete the sentences. MailChimp just needs to go and build the complete the sentences bit. So what we'd have to believe is that we're going to build all of their stack so that we can send 500 million mails a day and all that sort of stuff in the space of time that they can't build the AI. So that's how I've been. That's the sort of calculus I think about when I think about where the advantages are. I think if you were to rebuild it today and you'd build none of what's there and everything would look totally different, then yeah, like it's go time, right? If you actually wish you could borrow all their servers and their sender reputation and all that sort of shit, then I think you're at best you're trying to add a thin layer on top of what is ultimately a surviving incumbent. So yeah, like it's the same way we used to say this a lot about like say email startups, right? We're going to do email, but we've got one new idea on top of email, and I'm like, that's great. So you've got 5 years of roadmap to get to like Gmail quality or even superhuman quality like email, and then you can add your little feature on top.
No, I love it. You've spoken before to me about kind of the road to the start line.
Yeah, long road to the start. Yeah,
and I love that analogy. Can I also, when we think about adoption cycles, I think everyone gets quite excited by everything's going to change overnight. And and this is my point, which is like, I totally agree with you in terms of that ad optimization engine. But when a lot of their customers are Danone and are L'Oreal in Europe and are like European
Titans of technology is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I hear you.
What is this chat GP thingy?
Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly.
And so it's going to be 5-10 years.
Yeah, but I agree with you. But aren't you writing checks for 5-10 years?
I'm probably 15.
Yeah. So like I think the nature of the role you have full time and I have whenever on the weekend I decide to write an angel check is I can't really think about like, will this be a big bang next year? If I see somebody going after an area where I think there's like a real massive chance for like investment, I'd probably say I should sell my stock in the incumbent over the next 2 years. And I should plant the seeds in this upstart today with a view towards payday in 7 years. And like even in 7 years' time, the revenue streams might not have crossed. Like this thing could be like this, but still far below the other. So like you kind of have to, you're betting on the future. Like it was ultimately what we are betting on when I invested in AI for a startup today. I'm betting on what the world and adoption and market appetite for AI is going to be like in like at least 4 years. If I try and give the Fin pitch to a lot of like old school banks or insurance company, they're like, whoa, horsey, slow down. I liked the bit where you said you could handle a simple reset password, but now you're telling me it's going to like talk to my team, so it's just, you have that dynamic of like, it's that old, that like crossing the chasm style adoption where some people are like early adopters, some people are like open-minded, some people are like cynics, and some people are laggards or whatever. We're definitely only selling to like the first 20% of the market at the moment. But that's still a big market though.
I totally agree with you. I think one thing that we're starting to see though with a lot of kind of startups created within the last 12 to 18 months who are selling to incumbents is like experimental budget evaporation.
Yeah.
And what I mean by, you know what I mean, but like essentially they've tried it with a couple of pilots. It's kind of been interesting and it kind of hasn't gone anywhere.
Some digital transformation project that got spun up for $100,000 or whatever.
Exactly. Are we about to enter a trough where experimental budgets go to zero or go reduced again before we see the spike again? How do you think about that?
We care a lot about the ROI of Fin, and thankfully it's kind of self-evident. Like as an example, yesterday I think OpenAI had a 45-minute outage, And I think everyone got a real taste of what the world was like before you had Finn. Because you got these support teams being like, yo, what's this new spike in volume? And we're like, oh, Finn had to like hand over to human. Areas where it's very, how would you say, speculative and open-ended. We thought it would be cool if we could run a little bit of AI to generate ideas for a workshop or whatever, right? They're definitely going to get cut to zero, and somebody's going to check a box saying, and we're very future focused. But I think anyone who's got a product that is genuinely like delivering real value, I think those budgets are going to stick around and actually massively increase.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. How those budgets are spent is depending on pricing models. We've seen, obviously, per seat model dominates SaaS. I had Miles Grimshaw on from Benchmark, and he said actually consumption model will absolutely use up and overtake it.
Yeah.
How do we think about changing pricing models in the face of AI?
I think there's loads of obvious applications, like our world most directly. Like if Finn is indeed doing like 50%, then like will businesses buy as many seats? What we're seeing a lot is like businesses are choosing to keep the seats and keep the people, and like just turn the dial on quality. So they just get really good at support.
Do you think that's because they want to be really good at support, or because they don't quite trust it enough yet?
It's a good question. I mean, like another way of saying it would be like, if in a year's time there's another market downturn, will they still hold firm on that? But I think that comes down to the degree to which they see great service as a competitive advantage, which isn't the case for all businesses, but is definitely the case for some.
Yeah.
But like in general, I think his point about like consumption pricing outpacing, or like, you know, ultimately taking the place of seat pricing, I think is going to be true. I think a lot of work is going to get handed over to LLMs over the next 5 years. And I think we're going to start trying to like price against the work that's being done, not price against the seats or the employees, but just say, how much is it worth for you to have all of your digital assets created dynamically? Or how much is it worth for you to have like your customers get sub-second replies to common questions? Like that's the actual right way to think about pricing in the future. I think the wrong way to think about it is, you know, we're selling work. We're not selling seats, and we're not selling like, you know, incremental, you know, tasks completed. We're just like, what's the work and what does it cost to get done? And you'll see a lot of these folks will start, like when somebody actually does a good job of an AI coach or personal trainer or financial advisor, the person who does it really well will be able to justify pricing it similar to what the human costs, because people have already been paying humans for this for a long, long time. And I think people will be comfortable transferring that fee to a bot because it's 24/7, it's multilingual, it's blah blah, and obviously they can bring the price down as they see fit as well.
The fees are expensive. Like OpenAI is not cheap.
No, not at all.
It's predicated largely on the cost of compute.
Yes.
To be fair on them, how will we see the cost of compute change? Will it, you know, align to traditional Moore's law? How do we think about that? And does just all value accrue back to NVIDIA?
I don't have any like concrete answer here. What I can say that generally happens is like, there is no tech really in history that has not gotten cheaper. There is no like piece of hardware or software that hasn't ultimately been ripped off by a cheaper candidate to offer a lower prices to more of the market. No matter what way we go, we will see a kind of a fleshing out of the spectrum. So right now, I think we've got like high-end NVIDIA powering high-end LLMs, and we should assume on the fullness of time that they're going to like continue to produce, and they're going to find more, how would you say, more market points that they can sell potentially simpler or more basic chips at. And same with the LLMs. There'll be the fast LLM and there'll be the accurate LLM, and people will make choices between them, and there'll be the cheap one and the dear one and all that sort of stuff. We'll see the solution space fully explored. And in that exploration, I think what you're going to get is like, yeah, I don't think NVIDIA in 5 years' time will be sitting here proud as the only people who can do a GPU. And I don't think that OpenAI will be able to like be the only people who can do LLMs properly. I think, you know, there'll be winners and losers. There'll be like the best, but the best isn't necessarily the biggest market share, you know?
100%.
So like, you just have to realize this is all going to be a spectrum, and like people are basically going to be finding where is the most dollars to be made, right?
Would you be a buyer of OpenAI at 90 billion?
I know that they have a funky thing where you can only make a certain amount of return back on your investment, as far as I'm aware. Like I think they have some sort of policy like after 100x you have to sell back or something like that.
Wow, I didn't know that. But as a net new investor, would you buy at 90?
Yeah, it's just straight up on clean terms would I buy at 90. And I think they're doing $1 billion in revenue or something like that is what I've heard. I probably would buy a bit to be along for the ride, but I don't think I'd be like putting millions into it, because I don't, you know, it would be a small fun check for me. I think on the whole, I'd make the bet that they'll pass 90 in value. I think that's doable.
But you got to see multiples on that. You need to see a 5x on that. So
you
the question
need
is,
to see
it a 500 billion?
Yeah. So you need to see multiples. I don't. I'm just throwing in fun money, right? Like, if I was an investor trying to like make my name, would I go all in like on putting like I don't know 10 billion into OpenAI for 90 or whatever? I don't think I would, and the reason is that whilst I think they'll pass 90, your question was could they go to 500 in the near term or like within the life stage of the fund? The areas I'd be wary of is Amazon. I just think Amazon play this game well. So like I could see Amazon just like flat up like buying Anthropic and being like, let's just make this part of the EC2 cluster. And that's just a very easy route to market. And I think if OpenAI run out of new vectors of differentiation and the commoditization starts to kick in, even for basic stuff, I think it'll just become an easier, like, why wouldn't you just use Amazon? It's already in the cloud. It's already virtually private. It's, you can like leapfrog a lot of other adoption concerns. So I think they're one risk. I think Microsoft are probably less of a risk because of the pretty close partnership they have. I don't really know what Google has up their sleeve. I don't even know if they have sleeves at this point. But I suspect that like they won't be totally napping on this.
Have you not been impressed by Bard? When Bard came out, everyone was like, "Oh, OpenAI."
I played with Bard a bit, and I wasn't unimpressed with it. It felt like another version of a ChatGPT. I'm more underwhelmed by their leadership in this area. Like they don't. It feels like Google, who kind of owned all this at the start, bear in mind with the original paper on Transformers, feels like they have like rescued defeat from the jaw of victories in a sense. From the jaws of victory. What we saw on Tuesday of this week, I don't know when this will go out, but like from my mind was like Sam and to some degree even Satya out there like talking from a leadership position, from an authoritative position about where we are, where we're going, what's happening, what the future holds, etc. And I don't think we've had that yet from Google. And I think that's the sort of, to take a leading position, I think you need to like do that thing where you walk out on stage and say like, here's our mission, here's where we're going, here's where the whole world is. Like we have a big wide-eyed vision. Like think of like Elon Musk saying he wants to terraform Mars ultimately, like like it's like that is like leading a company in a certain direction. You're saying here's the end goal. I feel like Bard unfortunately felt like we had to release this because ChatGPT was getting a lot of traction. It didn't feel like we've actually cracked search again. We've reinvented ourselves all over again. They need to have that sort of a Jay-Z like allow me to reintroduce myself moment, right? Where they come back and they say like Google 2 is here. That's what we need to have here.
I totally get you, but they don't want Google too because the cost of doing it actually cannibalizes the core business. And so it's it's Netflix and,
now you're pulling onto the real potential problem, which is, are they willing to risk it all to win it all, right? Like, are they willing to disrupt themselves, or are they happy to take the like long, slow decline into obsolescence or irrelevance or whatever, right? The long, slow, profitable decline with like predictable shareholder outcome, right? Versus saying, no, we're going to like take a massive hit to our own revenue. And we're going to go like LLM first, and the future of Google is actually going to be a Q&A style thing, even though we haven't yet worked out how we're going to monetize that. And like it's a massive existential risk, and people have thought about
what would you do? Yeah. Genuinely, like, it's so hard. I mean, it's easy to say here, but if you are CEO of Google and you have shareholders on Wall Street,
I'd be scrambling to find ways that I kind of hate what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it because I think it's what I would feel compelled to do. I'd be scrambling to find ways that like companies can sponsor injections into the LLM. Who is the best footballer in the world? And the answer is clearly like Lionel Messi. But you could say something like, according to Transfer Market, the answer is Lionel Messi, right? Like, and that's what I mean by a sponsored injection, right? And then like you could potentially like augment the Bard style answer with such injections so that it's presenting you facts that it is kind of disowning, right? Like it's kind of saying, hey, like this isn't the LLM deducing this is just what we think. This is what we've been paid to say whenever we talk about this type of thing. And like, I think that's the angle, that's kind of the attack vector I'd go on. And I'd try and float that with all my big ad buyers and sort of say, hey, look, let's be honest, the world is going to go to LLMs. So, even if this doesn't work, we have to give it a lot. and then I try and like get some sort of traction going for that type of ad model. Then I'd explain to the investors, we have to move to this because the alternative is the company basically starts to be on a ticking clock, right?
I just don't know if you can move a Titanic-sized ship like Google in that direction so radically.
Yeah.
Without just tanking shareholder value. I mean, it's almost like SVB coming out saying, "Oh, we're fucked." It's like Google
Well,
coming out saying,
I just think the idea of like, let's not talk about it is not a great strategy either, right? So I don't know. I agree. It sounds tough, but I think you have to be willing to stare irrelevance in the face and choose a different path.
I love that. I actually had someone on the show the other day, and they said actually the winner will be Apple. I was like, unpack that one for me. And they said because they own the end consumer. Google pays so much every single year to be the default browser on Apple. Apple could create their own LLM. They own the endpoint on both your iMac, your Mac, your iPad, your iPod, whatever it is, your iPhone. They will be the winner because of that touch point with the consumer. Do you agree?
It depends on the winner of what. I think Apple will make massive strides forward with AI. I'm kind of disappointed how long it's taken them.
Well, this is my point. What makes you say that? Because so far we kind of left searching.
Yeah. For sure. You have to assume Apple's a really well-run company. And you have to assume that there's a head of AI in there. And you have to assume that they're training LLMs and they're looking for LLMs that can possibly run on their hardware natively and not even have to talk to the cloud. And Apple are very privacy focused. So they're going to get all that shit correct. And you have to assume it's all going to work with your AirPods, your watch, and your phone and all that sort of stuff. I would be shocked if that wasn't the case. So then what will they win is the question. I think what they'll win is this idea of Siri might finally become useful, and I just think it's there now. Like Siri is currently not useful because it doesn't really have enough smarts. When Siri can be as conversational as ChatGPT and can take actions on the device, I actually think it'll change like the entire interaction model across desktop and iOS as well, in huge ways. So I think Apple will win there, but that doesn't outrule OpenAI's success or Amazon's success selling Anthropic or something like that, or any of the other scenarios. I just think who owns consumer AI at a kind of base level, it could well be Apple. And then in that world, what's interesting is we might see a new type of commoditization of like services. So you might just say, Siri, call me a taxi. And you might not give a shit which taxi shows up. And Siri, order me a burger. And Siri, play this song. And Siri's default is going to be to play that song on whatever, like on Apple. If they become this really nice intermediary layer where you don't even pick the app you launch, because that is a form of user selection we don't even want in our lives. You just say the thing you want to happen and leave it to Apple to work out what should happen. Then Apple would take this new primal position. It's like owning the homepage of Google or something like that. It's like we get to redirect all user intent to anywhere we want.
Well, it also opens up, in my mind, like paid search. Because if you are a provider, you could pay Apple to say, hey, if you're Spotify, you could pay Apple to say, hey, when someone says play Jay-Z, play ours first.
Yeah.
Well, that's a terrible example.
No, I know what you're saying. Play it through our service first. I think that's true, but I think Apple will say absolutely no way. That's not their shtick, right? Like, as in Apple have never been. Apple are always customer first. Like another argument there, like this is something more googly. If OK Google or whatever their thing is called, their Siri equivalent is called, I could totally imagine Google doing a thing where they give away effectively free Android phones powered by the fact that they now control the intent layer, which is when you say, okay, Google, call me a taxi, Google goes and they get you whatever taxi, which comes from whichever of the highest paid provider.
That's so interesting. So you give away the hardware for free as your CAC, your customer acquisition cost.
Yeah, and you make it all back in lifetime services. Yeah.
That's a fascinating one.
Yeah, I mean, Google give away a search engine and they make it back in paid sponsorships, right? It's the same model. It's just a different sort of rendering of it.
What about Facebook? Facebook can't be asleep at the wheel, but they don't end the end touch point with the consumer. I've really been thinking about this one because I like him or hate him, Mark's a fucking brilliant CEO.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
What happens there? Because as I said, they don't end that end touch point. They're not Amazon in terms of what they have with AWS.
Yeah, I don't know how Facebook think about this at all, but what I would say is like Facebook have to look at their actual business, which is like Instagram and WhatsApp, and it's like Facebook itself and it's Oculus, and I'm sure the question I'd be scrambling to answer if I was them is just like, what does AI mean for all of these services, and what does the LLM advances mean for all these services? So I can imagine they might like have a bot that sits inside WhatsApp, like where you could actually like say it could become the new way to like find me the nearest florist, and like maybe WhatsApp will put you directly in contact with them and you can speak directly to them or speak directly to their bot. I can imagine them kind of interjecting from that point of view. Instagram, there's like loads of ways that could go. Like most of the ways I think with like AI applied to Instagram ends up in like deep fake territory. So I don't know, like I'm sure there's like other more like valuable uses, if you know what I mean. Oculus has really obvious applications of AI LLMs like infinite worlds and insane games. Like take a combination of LLMs and Dolly and put on a headset and live in that world. It's it's fascinating to think of what's possible. And Facebook.com, I don't really know. Like, I mean, I feel like that feels like it's like up there with LinkedIn and one of those just like bastions of the old internet. I don't know what people use it for anymore, but I think we all log into it every day, but we don't really know why.
No, it's fantastic for reminding me of friends' birthdays who I don't really know about.
Yeah, or care.
Good. I won't message them, that's for sure. Final one on the kind of like landscape assessment, but it's just Adobe. Everyone says like, oh, Adobe moved very fast and like speed of movement. How do you think about Adobe's movement?
I think they've produced some really cool stuff as it relates to visuals. And I think if they play their cards right, they can actually expand beyond creatives, if you know what I mean. Like Adobe previously or heretofore is being like the creatives tool. Like as in you have to be good at you have to be good at design or whatever to use Adobe. And that's even kind of true for their Figma acquisition with the exception of FigJam. Like, you know, if you're not good at like drawing or whatever, the tool is not that rewarding to use. I think if they play this correctly, loads of people want to draw things but can't, right? Like if I said, draw me a picture of a penguin, right? Like most people will make a balls of it, right? So I guess people who want to draw, and then a much smaller subset, people who can draw, and then a much, much smaller subset, people who are very good at drawing, is like, it's an example of the total addressable market and the serviceable market, and like, you know, how much of them can we actually charge money for? With the idea of like some of Adobe's features where you just select a bit of text, you say, make the sky darker, and you select another piece and say, take this person out of the photo. Or you say, give me a rendering of like a leprechaun walking over a rainbow. And it does all this like instantly to a pretty high degree of fidelity and like just nice polish, like certainly far beyond what an average illustrator could do in terms of both maybe not an average illustrator, far beyond what an average person could do and potentially beyond what some illustrators could do. And it can do it instantly or like in 4 seconds or whatever. So I think we should see a world where more people are able to like weaponize the ideas they have in their head in a visual form than previously could. Previously, you'd just be like, oh, I have this vision in my head. And then whenever I go to pick up my mouse and open up like Photoshop, it falls apart. Now you don't need that. Now like, thinking and rendering become like this new sort of skill set that you can have. So I think Adobe could see a significant expansion of people who care about Adobe tech if they play it well. Because Adobe's going to be like, oh, if you have an idea and you're struggling to visualize it, just use Adobe. Like, and you're like, oh, well, here's what I'm trying to draw. And he goes, I want a diagram and I want this and I want that. Oh, you got that nearly right. Let me select this piece. All right, edit that so it's not like this, it's like that, and have her facing the other direction. Okay, it can do all that shit. Really, like at least the tech demos I've seen, the stuff that like Scott Belsky shares and all that. It's like phenomenal looking stuff. They could have a really significant expansion of people who could use Adobe software far beyond just creative geniuses.
Where does value accrue most? Is it the application layer? Or is it the infrastructure layer? And how does that change over the short and long term?
The only parallels we have to go by here are what's happened in other areas, right? Generally speaking, I think right now, a lot of value is going straight into the infra. Like as in we're handing it all at the back door to OpenAI in this case, right? In your first question about commoditization, if that happens, then the value starts to reduce there, right? Because, if there's more competitors offering the same thing, that's the beginning of commoditization, or at least you go from a monopoly to an oligopoly to ultimately perfect competition where and price goes down at each step, excluding collusion or price fixing, which are usually illegal. That's how I expect that'll play out unless OpenAI can continue to find mass market differentiation, which is always a hard thing to find, right? Like as in the differentiation that all the customers care about, not just specifics, right? So let's assume over time, I believe that like just, the amount of people investing in the space means that I think the infrastructure layer will gradually get a lot more AWS-like, right? Price mixed with strength of product as a competitive weapon, if you know what I mean, right? Amazon make good money off Intercom, but they're also like, we're all in on them and we're very, we're very committed to them. So I think, that's what the competitive battleground. There'll probably be 3 or 4 big providers, is my guess. There'll be probably GCP, AWS, maybe OpenAI directly, and I'm sure Azure. That's how I think that layer will play out. And they'll end up in pretty direct price competition with each other. Where does the value accrue beyond that? I think just differentiation. Value just generally follows differentiation around the stack. So whoever has the stuff you can't get anywhere else can charge the margin state no one else can charge. Sometimes it means quality of software product. Sometimes it means quality of network or social network. Sometimes it means like we've got the most distributors in our marketplace. But like whoever has the differentiation that no one else can get, is the person who can actually, basically charge the highest price.
The thing that worries me almost is like, the best quality product does not always win. Well, it's bundled into our existing package. We don't need a new vendor relationship. We don't need new security and compliance. It's 85 versus fuck it, we're not technologists anyway. So product doesn't always win.
Correct. I generally think if you're playing in somebody else's playground and you're bringing one little thing, even if you do have a reason why your thing will be definitely better persistently and sustainably, it needs to overcome a lot just to be worth the cost of an extra tool in the stack.
Yeah, I totally agree. With that in mind, if you project out in the next 10 years, will more value accrue to startups or incumbents?
With AI, a lot was made at the start of like, ooh, everyone's in trouble. And I remember when we first released our first wave of AI features, which was just AI in the inbox, it was things like summarization, expansion, change tone, like, take this blunt reply and make it polite. Somebody, I can't remember who, somebody like one of the big dogs, use it as a showcase of like, this is why there won't be new startups built on this. All the value will go to the incumbents. And I think the hypothesis there is that if the value is available on tap from OpenAI, it's on tap. In our earlier example, it's on tap for MailChimp and it's on tap for the new startup too, right? So the thin integration where you're shelling out for your differentiation to a third party, it does not create a wave of disruption. The disruption comes, as we were saying earlier, like it's when you would build the entire thing differently in a world post AI. If you put a gun to my head, I'd say incumbents will probably do better out of AI than like startups thinking they can displace incumbents. But that's not the same thing as saying that like startups have no business in AI. I think there'll be loads of new stuff in new areas that no one's ever seen before because of AI.
And my hard thing is like, as a general capital allocator and capitalist who wants to make money bluntly, I think the upside is already priced into Microsoft or Nvidia, where I'm not looking at them like, oh, there's a buying opportunity now because they're so richly priced already, I think.
Yeah. I think that's totally correct. I think like the areas where AI will deliver most value in startups will be things that just weren't possible before are now possible. And I think like you'll see companies like Synthesia they'll produce massive new things that just literally weren't being done before. And they're like new categories and new jobs, new workflows, new capabilities. That's where like I think you'll have the kind I'm really in trouble for this, but like there's so many people going after Synthesia space. That they don't have a huge amount ahead of anyone else. I guess, and like disclosure is I'm an investor in Synthesia, and I'm guessing you're not.
Disclosure, I met them, and I think I was one of the first VC meetings they ever had.
Oh wow!
Like when I first started Stride.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was just like, this is batshit crazy. Yeah. Terrible from me.
Yeah. You probably should have invested.
Thanks, man. Like 10 pre or something.
Independent of the actual company, I think what we're seeing there is a growth in, how would you say, like AI powered video customization to do lots of like things that people bear in mind, the cost of video editing and all that sort of shit is so high. So let's say like you have a video that explains how your product works and then you change the name of one of the features. Now, like in the current world, that's a reshoot. In the new world, you edit a JSON file. You know, we're moving into a different fucking world here. I will defend Synthesia all day long, but like, we'll come back in 5 years and we'll see. But I think what you'll see is the area of like AI powered, say, video creation in that case didn't exist 3-4 years ago, really. And it's going to be a big area, is my guess. I think you're going to see Adobe in there.
For me, I'm like, I don't know why Adobe don't do this. I don't know why you're not seeing like Descript do this, which is an editing platform already. For me, this sits natively in an edit platform where it's like, hey, Des actually said the wrong thing here.
For sure.
Cut it in here.
An interesting thing for you to scratch on then is you're simultaneously saying you don't see that they're an advantage over everyone else, and you also don't know why anyone else isn't doing it. So I'd posit that maybe they are doing things that are hard to do.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that I think it belongs inside an existing editing application.
Oh, right, yeah, fair enough. Like, I mean, everything, if you're building anything in creativity, it all belongs inside Adobe. Like, it's the terminal buyer of creativity, right? Like,
or Descript or any kind of consumerized application.
Yeah. I mean, Descript to me, I think is much more focused on a very specific use case than say Synthesia is. I think they're going to nail that use case.
Descript's awesome. Fucking killed.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I turned that down too.
Yeah.
If you would like, I can send you all my turn down, so you should just invest. Can I ask, you're also a fantastic angel investor. Given what we've seen over the last year with AI, has that changed how you think about angel investing? Like, is it like, why on earth would you? I'm investing in an enterprise software company now with no AI. Is it like, what are you doing?
If I was investing in like a classic Cumbernauld Gardner B2B SaaS enterprise company in this day and age, I would need to be quite convinced that AI has no role, or if it does have a role, the founders are all over it, I'm going to lead. Otherwise, I just don't see why I take the
Do you
risk.
think you can accurately assess whether it has a role? And what I mean by that is just like OpenAI and ChatGPT and all the other players are so good, moving so fast. I don't rate my knowledge that highly.
If you're building a web analytics product today, I'm just picking like a space I don't really understand, and I don't think I have a dog in the fight in the web analytics space at all. If someone was trying to pitch me like, we're going to redo GA, everyone hates GA, go Google Analytics, it's gotten too complicated, so we're going to do a better version of Google Analytics. I'm like, okay, I'm listening, and I can kind of see my first few questions, because like this is an area that isn't obviously affected by AI in that it's reporting on data points that that are gathered on websites about did the user visit the checkout page or not, right? What I want to see is show me your reporting engine, show me, have you considered how like chat UI could be relevant here, like how like basically instead of building like 150 million drop downs to like, you know, query by browser type, by dev week, by this, by that, can I just type the query I want to see and can you generate it? Can you go one step ahead of me and suggest new things? Can you use AI to like power your reporting engine to suggest new reports I should be looking at that I haven't seen before? I'd want to be confident that the founders have thought through that and come to a conclusion. And it might be we're not going to build any of that, or it might be, you know what, we should really go hard on like natural language as a query engine for reporting. That's like where I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'd want to see that. And I'm kind of making this up on the fly, but like if they said to me, no, Des, we don't think AI is going to change anything to do with how people query analytics tools, at that point, I'm probably leaving it. I'm probably saying, right, I don't know how you can be so confident in that. And if I'm honest, I actually think it will.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you look at your deployment today, has it changed much? Like, have you ever been investing more? Have you been investing
not
less?
more, not too much more. I would say I've probably like the last 5 or 6 checks I've written have all been into companies that are either pure AI or heavily AI infused.
Of your deal flow today, how much is AI in the first tagline? I would say for me, it's 80%.
I'm probably more B2B SaaS exposed, so maybe I'm probably more like 60%. But yeah, if the question was like how much of it mentions AI in like some bullet tree or whatever, then yeah, 100%.
Is the majority of like scale up AI programs bullshit?
What's a scale up AI program?
We are Notion with AI. We are everyone has an AI now. When you said about Intercom being AI first, I was like,
here we go. Yeah. It comes back to this, like, does the product make more sense with AI or not? Like, to me, I think what we saw over the last 3, maybe 4 months has been a lot of companies. This is what that GIF I tweeted, that video I tweeted was about. Like, you're seeing a lot of people doing really pointless shit with AI just to like, you know, like kind of reminds me of the early days of JavaScript. People did all these fancy effects that were totally pointless. Like they used libraries like Scriptaculous and all that, like to do just fancy, like, ooh, it fades away. And you're like, why does it fade away? You know, there's definitely bits of bullshit you're going to see. Like as in the joke being before is like people use AI to expand on their email and then people use AI to reduce the expansion down to a compressed sentence. And it's like, maybe you should just be writing straight sentences to each other. Like there's a lot of that type of bullshit in AI, which is people reaching for the easiest to use features and trying to like reverse engineer a demand for them inside their product. So like summarize this shopping cart in natural English. You're like, well, it looks like the user is buying a robe and it's a size me. It's like, who gives a shit, you know? So like there's a lot of that happening where in the scale up space where I think it's somebody looking to like wave a flag or get the like marketing juice that comes with saying you're now something AI. What I look to sort of interrogate the value is just like, is there something happening now that wasn't possible before? Or is there somebody who doesn't have to do something now that they had to do before? If the answer to either of those is yes, then I'm sort of bought in. You know, if it's basically like, you know, oh, you know what, it's really, really important that people like whatever, like, you know, summarize the Google Doc in real time on the right hand side as they're writing it. I'm like, I don't know, you know.
Okay, can I ask you? You know, we laughed there about kind of me going, oh, AI first, whatever. I spoke to Bobby before the show at Equals, who was obviously with you at Intercom, and he said that you were actually one of the masters of marketing. And you thought of as a product OG, but actually you should be credited more with a lot of early marketing efforts. Why does most B2B marketing suck first?
To leave any sort of lasting impression on somebody, I think you have to say something that is like unique, as in like it can't be the same thing that everyone says. Valuable, as in it has to actually matter to them, and simple, right? They have to be able to get it in one read. If you can speak to your users in a way that presents them value that they can that they haven't heard before, that they can only get from you and that they can understand, then generally speaking, you tend to like resonate with your users. And it's like you can't just walk in on somebody's life and just start shouting stuff at them. So you need permission to speak to them, and that's where you might lean on thought leadership or like make yourself somebody worth listening to. But I think most businesses fail to say something that's either, like they fail on one of the three tests. It's either not unique, it's not simple, or it's not valuable to them. So you see things like inbox reinvented. I wasn't really looking to reinvent my inbox. Or it's like, forget everything you know about blah. So I didn't know anything about blah. So you have a lot of like this like marketing speak, if you know what I mean, like which is just people just lean for like the marketing veneer or polish that you get. And it just gets a bit too salesy, and in doing so it loses its specificity and it loses its perhaps bite or its uniqueness or whatever.
I think they also lose humanity. It's like you put on the Intercom marketing manager hat and then you're like, thrilled to announce. Who speaks like, I'm thrilled to announce? You're like totally jacked about this.
Excited to announce our like ongoing relationship with, it's like, I think there's a like, Owen, our CEO, is just, he like, if I could describe him, if I could ascribe him one defining quality, it's probably authenticity. But I think it's just speak the words you want to say. That's like, that's the thing that is like so important to have like credible marketing, is that you say the things that you would actually say. You don't put on like a marketing hat where you rattle off a load of bullshit, if you know what I mean. Most startups with marketing, with B2B or B2C, they forget to say the reason, they forget to say the thing that makes them unique, that's valuable to the users. And if they're going up against an incumbent, the worst thing they can say is like, oh, we're like a new type of inbox, blah, 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 blah. Because they say, oh, I put you into the same category as the incumbent. You need to say, here's the things that we're different. Like, here's the reasons that we're better than blah. And like, that's usually hammers home, like, again, simple so they understand it. Unique and valuable.
Because it goes, I always love the Simon Sinek. People buy why you do it, not what you do.
It comes down to what type of marketing we're talking about. In my head, I'm talking about product marketing here. Like I'm talking about like, what does the homepage say when you go there, right? If you go to Asana and like it opens up, one day Dustin was struggling to manage a project at Facebook and he really wanted to get an overall view. You're like, dude, I'm closing that tab. It's like, what the hell is the thing you do? When it comes to consuming the overall brand, if you like, like what is this whole company about? What is its raison d'etre? Which I think is more important in certain industries and verticals. You're like, hang on, if I'm going to like really align myself with these people, I need to understand what makes them tick. That's when you're going to like /about or /vision or whatever to sort of read a bit more about what the hell's going on here. Like, as in, are you guys just growth hackers who stumbled into a project management company, or do you actually care about the nature of human productivity? Simon's point's not wrong, but I think most of the time when you're trying to sell software, the best thing you can do is probably say what the software is about and not talk about like, like the origin story or whatever.
You can thank Bobby for these. If you could change one thing about, Intercom's marketing over the years, knowing all that you know now, what would you change?
I wasn't responsible for all of Intercom's marketing, like branding and all that sort of stuff was all own. The areas I was probably responsible for were our events and our content marketing and sort of, thought leadership in that regard. I oversaw demand generation multiple times, and I think I kind of probably failed in every single effort there. If I could change anything in terms of things that I would trust myself to do a better job on, I would probably try to more tightly align the audience we were building with the product that we were selling.
Talk to me about that. You mean the content that you created this large funnel, but it wasn't actually all aligned to the product and the buyer?
Correct, yeah. It was large, which was great, but it was then harder to translate that into demand that you could capture.
Yeah, qualification was tough.
Yeah. I think it's like, so if I walk into, like, I mean, even yesterday I was at a conference here, dude, I read the Intercom blog. And I'm like, what do you work on? Oh, like, I'm a program manager on the infrastructure team. And I'm like, you're not going to buy customer support software, So I think I think probably I prioritized growing an audience for the blog over growing the right audience for the blog. And the net is that we have a large audience for the blog, people who are like design or into product or even into engineering, people who are maybe into like startups in general, like even people who are into marketing. But what we don't have necessarily, what we didn't go deep on early enough was just the actual like, sort of people who are best positioned by Intercom.
I have two thoughts there. I think first is like, you have to go in content, you have to go as niche as possible, get to 1,000 true fans as fast as possible. Yeah. So I'm kind of on one side with you, agreeing with you there. And then on the other, I'm going, actually, does it matter? Because if you have huge audience and you just have scale of distribution, word of mouth starts to kick in, brand starts to kick in, validity of followership starts to kick in, and it will convert. You have to have faith that it will convert. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's a different approach. Like I agree with you. Like as in, I agree that like, hey, if you have 1 million readers a month and like 1% of them are like your buyer, or if you're like, whatever, like I can't do the maths on the fly here, but like if you have like 10,000 readers a month and whatever, like some same percentage that nets out with the same number as total, they're both valid strategies. Like a small focused audience or a big unfocused audience that contains in it the small focused audience. that works. I can't, like, I mean, you're asking me what would I do again. I think I probably would have just tried to be a bit more focused early on.
Yeah.
An interesting thing we measure, like when we look at, say, social stuff we share on social, like it's easy to get like a viral tweet these days. Like it's not easy, but like you can have a viral banger.
What does it drive?
Well, so that's the thing, not a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't drive a lot of follows, doesn't drive a lot of anything other than like a few like quote tweets and a few retweets or whatever, like, you know, hundreds or whatever. But what's interesting to me is, you know, we've been having popular viral moments. The thing I care more about and I'm more excited about is like when we share something that's pretty, I don't want to say boring, but just pretty focused on like the only people who give a shit about this are support people. The people who engage with that content is growing. And that's the thing I care about more than, say, just general followership. I'm like, effective followership is the thing to look at.
I totally agree with you. Honestly, I think we lost ourselves at 20 VC. I saw a lot of content producers around me getting bigger and better numbers than us.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck you, I can do what you're doing better.
Yeah.
That's not my job. My job is to serve the best venture and startup podcast. I don't need to interview musicians who are entering venture or sports stars who are entering.
Yeah.
Like, know your customer, know your product.
Yeah. And like the reality is getting like if Bex enters investing, his followership isn't that useful to you.
No,
you know what I mean?
It's not at all.
Yeah. So you're saying if I tell you that Beckham wants to be on a podcast, you don't want him?
No. I mean, I would be happy to engage.
Yeah, of course.
No, I get you there. Okay, I'm going to flip. So you can change one thing about Intercom product strategy. What would you change? Knowing what you know now, looking back historically.
That's a tough question. Because like the easy thing to do is to reach for like, here's all the features we killed, but like that's something I did do, like or we did do. I probably would have taken integrations more seriously earlier. Understanding more about Intercom's role within the tech stack, knowing that we're not the only, show in town, understanding that we have to play nice alongside like workforce management solutions, CRMs, whether it's like Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever, QA tools, Slack, you name it. I think we could have gone harder earlier on that, and I think it probably would have been more valuable to our users.
You can change one thing about the sales motion or the sales platform.
I'll answer a slightly different question, which is I think there is very little best practices advice in startups that actually survives more than 5 or 6 years, in my opinion.
Why is that?
Because I think everything is just constantly evolving around us. Like even like all this AI shit's going to like upend a load of like product strategy advice that has been holding solid for 10 years, right? So I think most of the time advice expires. And I think, so let's just say how you go to market. If you're in 2012 and you're talking to like VCs or like, senior experienced people about what's the best way to go to market, what they'll all tell you is basically hire a sales leader and you kind of run up market and get away from those scrappy little companies, right? And that was kind of like the advice that was the sort of norm in all the blogs and all that back then. It was just like, build a sales machine, up you go, right? That's how DocuSign did it or whatever, right? That's how...
Work for Bill.com.
Yeah, exactly. or Box or somebody from that just slightly previous era. Around 2013, 14, 15, people started to realize Dropbox was actually doing well. They actually had managed to do it without having to go like all enterprise. But the big dog in the story here is obviously Atlassian, who presented an entirely different way to go to market and build a massive business without running up market. If you play it out, not maybe in parallel, I don't think it's necessarily sequential, but Shopify, say for example, are still as relevant. If I just want to sell this bottle of Fiji water, they're still probably to go to, but also they're a massive business, right? So they've managed to like not have to turn into like, the old school big commerce company where like you go and you have like 9 people show up to do solutions engineering and plug in your stuff.
We mentioned them. Look at HubSpot. I mean, HubSpot.
Totally. HubSpot have proved exactly that there's massive businesses to be built without ever having to go like all the way up market, right? I guess I'm saying all this to say like, the advice is almost out of date by the time it's best practice.
Okay, but I place, and tell me if I'm wrong because I want to learn from you. I really like serial entrepreneurs because I find there's so many things that you do very, very differently the second time, having messed up the first time.
Yeah.
Does that not render serial entrepreneurship relatively less important?
I think that skills, when I think about like if I had to start another company tomorrow, I think the stuff that I would definitely bring into the next company is not specific like go-to-market tactics or like bottoms-up adoption versus like going into the top of the market. It's not like marketing channels or tactics or anything. I think what it would be about is like what is the makeup of a senior executive team, and what do you want? What are the attributes of leaders at different stages of the company? How to interview, how to give the right feedback to people, how to assess where a hole is in your organization and how to deal with it, how to not lose yourself defending a narrative, but instead take reality, face it straight or whatever. I think they're all the sort of things, the more timeless pieces that I would learn. Like, I think it's reasonable to assume hiring executives is going to be a thing. It's reasonable to assume building a company culture is going to be a thing. It's reasonable to assume having a mission and a vision and values by which your business performs. They're all kind of timeless skills. And I think a lot of serial entrepreneurs know the mistakes they made and not being firm enough in the right areas or flexible enough in other areas or whatever. So I think that's the sort of stuff that you're investing in. They won't make that mistake again.
Do you think culture is a timeless skill? When you look at post-COVID, there is a sense of wanting to work from home a lot more, changing incentives, missions, time spent.
It's a fair question. Like, is managing humans the same today as it was 5 years ago? I probably not in a lot of ways. Yeah. And definitely generationally, I think it's different as well. I'm not trying to be evasive here, but if you just take one step up and just talk about it as in design a culture that attracts the maximum amount of talent and motivates them to work as hard as possible for the climate you're in, for the environment you're in, for the country you're in.
Maximum amount of talent or maximum quality of talent? Two different. Because I guess my point there is bluntly, when you said 900 people.
It comes down are we trying to weigh talent here or not? I guess what you want
but
is...
I don't think at 900 people you can only have A players. You're going to have some C players.
Yeah, well, specifically I would say you've got people who are early in their career and people who are seasoned, super experienced, super tenured, brilliant. We have interns, they're not yet A players. But to your question, is it a maximum quality or is it a maximum quantity? I guess what I mean is that you're not trying to maximize headcount. And I think for what's right, that's another thing that most seasoned entrepreneurs won't do a second time or third time, whatever. They won't see headcount as a vanity metric at all. Yeah, you want basically you want to attract the smartest folks you can. At the right level. You don't need 1,000 of them in an early stage startup. You need 4 to start, and then as you start to scale your culture, you'll realize, all right, we can't only hire A++ superstars because we'll be waiting all year for our next engineer. So you start to work out ways to scale, and you say, you know what, how about the A++ person leads the team and they can hopefully drag the B person up to an A+ standard or whatever. So you start thinking about it from that point of view.
What was the biggest mistake you've made on culture? So mine was being young, I tried to be everyone's friend, and I really believed that we were a family and we care about each other and yes, performance, but real love. Yeah, performance first. Kind of, Harry, actually, you need to toughen up.
I would say, it's probably the same mistake as you just alluded to. Just radical candor is something that I struggled with for a long time, and I probably still do. I'm better at checking myself, but the idea of telling somebody what they need to hear so that they have the best chance of succeeding in their own career versus telling them the thing that will make them happy. Society struggles with this in general. That are you ultimately looking out for the greater good for the person, or are you just optically looking out for it in the short term? And I think my version of that would be earlier Des would have given nudge and prod feedback, but what I probably need to do is to say hey, I don't think you can actually make it as a leader of blah until you can blah. And here's the skills that I just think are, close to a terminal gap in your skill set. And if you don't close them, I just don't see you either surviving here or honestly anywhere. And I think you need to invest and take me seriously in this. Whereas I was probably, in 2014, 2015, I was probably more likely to say, I actually making good progress, but here's a couple of areas where I'd like to see a little bit more. It was way, yeah. Well, it wasn't even shit sandwich. It was just way too cushioned. It was almost like I'd taken all the sting out of it, so that when they heard it, I remember Lauren, our head of people, saying to me something along the lines of, if this person's not really upset with you at the end of this, you haven't actually done the job. If this doesn't sting for them to hear, you should be suspicious, because it means you've definitely pulled the punch. And I think that was good advice at the time. I was very, so tempting to, because it's just so much easier in a conversation. But everyone's going to go good apart from that.
Or just not to have a conversation.
That's kind of the cost of entry for startups, because you don't have unlimited headcount. I think bigger companies can struggle with that. But yeah.
Any big lessons on riffs?
Don't put yourself in a position where you have to do them if it's at all possible.
Just because it is so cutting to culture.
It's just really fucking hard to get through. It's a big time sink. It's a big emotion sink. It's a big engagement sink. And it takes a long time to sort of plan, perform, and doing it all. The lessons I've kind of learned on riffs are more from other companies than anything Intercom has gone through. Seeing so let's say the last 12 months for startups in general, every other investor update I get has been, we've done a little riff, we've got,
But things are generally going good up and...
Yeah. Honestly, in a lot of these cases, Superhuman has this feature where if someone mails you, you can see on the right-hand side all the other mails they sent you. And you only need to click back 2 or 3 where it's like, we're excited to announce that we've hired not 1, but 2 VPs of partnerships or whatever. And you're like, oh... Yeah, you didn't realize that you were planting the seeds of the rift there. You know what I mean? In the same way I say you always want your office to be a little bit too small because it gets you this sort of vibrance and this kind of sense of hustle. Like there should always be a pile of work, and like there should always be a sense of like, holy shit, we've got so much to do.
I agree, but we spoke about some bigger rounds and more expensive prices before. There's so much VC cash that they're still raising 5 on 25, and they've got a lot of money, or 8 on 40 or whatever we're saying. The cash is just there. Like, do you worry about the venture market stage just ruining it?
I think you have to put it on the founders at that point. Like, as in, if someone gives you the money, you don't have to take the money. If you take the money, you don't have to spend the money. If you spend the money, you don't have to spend it on hiring. If you spend it on hiring, you don't have to spend it wastefully. It's a bit of a fucking... I
get you, but I just think it takes a very skilled person to go, we're going to put it in the bank and we're not going to touch it. Because then product expansion happens. And we could hire that extra data engineer. We could go into that new product. We could go into that new geography. It takes a really disciplined mind.
This has got to do like where the capital markets are at. Like, it's interesting you choose the word could in all those scenarios. Like, I think like, hiring fluctuates between like needs and coulds, right? Like, and maybes, it's easy to lie to yourself and say like the existing, the incremental thing that this person's going to do is going to be transformative. I would bet your second time founders don't, they hire slower, is my guess, because I just think it's an easy way to like burn up opportunity and ultimately lead yourself in a position where you might have to riff. In a lot of these companies say like, they're riffing people where they didn't have to hire them,
Children-wise, I think that's such an important part of one's life and one's mindset. Did having children impact how you manage and lead? It's interesting, I was on a holiday this summer and we were like me and my other half were like tasked with looking after these 2 kids. And they just like annoyingly approach you when you don't want to be approached. And instead of like going sod off, you have to turn up patience, delayed emotions.
It's hard to fully unbundle this because like other shit happened in the same period, like COVID and all that. So like I don't have a clean before and after. It made me more efficient in the time I'm at work for sure, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to work as much when I went home or whatever. And I noticed this in like, say, our CPO and our CTO. They both have like they've got, I guess, like 7 kids between them or something like that. I was always impressed with how like efficient and effective they were with their working hours. And I think I realized later on where that came from, which is just like when I'm on, I need to be on, and I need to be like emptying the tank of my A game, because at some stage I'm going to go home and have all these like kids and I have to deal with them, and I can't just come home exhausted, and I need to be active when I get home too. So I think that's probably the first way. I don't know if I got more patient necessarily. I mean, I definitely need more patience with my kids. I think the folks I work with, they don't antagonize me that often. So like patience isn't a string I pull on a lot, thankfully.
I mean, I also had them for a holiday briefly, and so it's very different to having them permanently. Yeah. Listen, I want to move into a quick fire round. So cool. I say, okay, CEO of any other company for a day. What company would it be?
I think Google, because I don't want to fix Google Meet. Like, yeah, it's honestly, if I have to go back to my job after a day and I'm going to go back to my normal life, I think Google Meet is definitely the product I really want to fix up.
Just use Zoom.
No, it's not that. It's like the chat bar on the side. Like basically, if I was the CEO of Google, what I'd do is I'd say, I need you guys to build me a fully functional Slack equivalent that also sits in the sidebar of all these things, and it has to work also with Google Docs. So when I'm having a hangout with Harry, if we're chatting, it should be the same thing as a persistent chat channel between me and Harry. And if I start a new Google Doc, it should be automatically shared with Harry. All of these things just feel like such donkey work that I have to go through every single time I jump on a call. If I was trying to solve a realistic tech problem in one day, I think that's probably the thing I'd go for. Other than that, like maybe I think I'd love to go to Spotify and basically say like, we're doing a new thing called Spotify Live where we cover all soccer. I think that's another thing I'd love to do. I think basically it's Spotify for soccer, like as in the idea that there's a single place you can go to watch all live streaming sports is like sitting right there. And I think it's just, everyone's scared shitless of the amount.
Couldn't because of rights.
Well, that's what I was going to say, but like, wasn't that true for like iTunes and music as well, right? I just think it's like the rights thing just seems to be like a deal that just needs to be done. So I do think like Spotify managed to negotiate such that they can play podcasts and music from all over the planet. I feel it feels like getting like Plymouth Argyle to agree that their matchable leads should be like live streamed. I think that's like, it should be doable.
I love you and me so much because I'm like, I'd probably like to be CEO of Warner Music so I can meet Dua Lipa. That was my thought process, but Google Meet's good too.
Yeah.
That's great. Do you think Slack's a good product? Like design? It is so busy.
Like my entire interface with Slack is jumping from channel to channel that I have an unread icon and typing answers back and then dragging files in every now and then to upload them. I ask so little of it that I don't have a strong opinion about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me, what's the right way to view competition?
I think the right way to view competition is with respect, and after you've launched and you're out the door, increasing comprehension. Comprehension meaning you have to understand why they're successful. Because I think it's very easy to be like, their product's shit, but maybe they're just brilliant at go to market. And if you don't understand that, you're going to be like, why is not anyone paying attention to me? I've got the better product. I think respect always, because it's just a better way to live life. They have the market. You want the market. You have to respect the fact that they got there. You know, everyone likes to quote like Jeff Bezos or whatever, like, oh, I ignore my competition. I just listen to my customers. Like, do listen to your customers. I think that's a good piece of advice. I just don't think ignoring competition, especially if you're like in a market where there is competition, I think it's essential to work out like, why do people pick them over you? Is that not a useful thing to know? Like, you can't listen to your customers if they're using your competitors. So
I also think psychologically, like, use it to fuel you and your team. I think it's useful to have a common enemy. Like, we are there to beat them.
Yeah. As long as you believe that beating them is the right prize, that makes sense. But like, oftentimes you can find yourself ruling over a graveyard, right? Like, if we just beat Zendesk, but Zendesk is like in the current state it's in, that won't be the full realization of what Intercom can be.
What state is Zendesk in? They're bought by PE, and they just like being used as a cash cow?
I don't really know because I don't know the inner workings, but certainly the PE cash cow playbook would look like raise prices, shrink roadmap, ring the register, package it up into a very efficient, like sort of cash producing machine and hand it over. I have no idea where they are, but you know, that's what, whenever anyone else is going to PE, that's usually what's in.
How did Owen coming back change culture?
It changes substantially. Like it's on coming back. It's also like just the new era of where startups are. I think we got hyper focused on a very specific use case. For the longest time, Intercom had been kind of a broader tool. So we came back and when Owen came back, we were like, right, let's go all in on one thing. Let's set a very clear like focus for literally everything we're doing. Like, let's, you know, increase the urgency. We had this initiative called like P52, which is like 52 weeks to basically rebuild all parts of the company. And that gave us a kind of ticking clock, and it gave us a very clear sense of like progress and momentum and engagement. We're just finishing it now. We went like gung-ho as a team of 900 folks towards rebuilding like, you know, marketing, branding, pricing, product, like, you know, you name it. It's like, by the time this goes live or in the next 5-6 weeks, all of that's going to look different.
Why did you make Bobby at Equals write a blog post a week?
Basically, Bobby asked me to invest and I said I will, but I was scarred by too many businesses who forget to tell people what they're all about. And what I mean by that is a lot of companies launch and they kind of have this kind of weird incel like vibe of like, why isn't anyone paying attention to me? And oftentimes, and I think I had just an investment I'd made had just finally wrapped up and it had died. It was really frustrating me that they had kind of forgotten to launch. And I was like, and to me, launch isn't like, oh, we've put up like an alpha page or something like that. Launch is like when you're laying it all out there. Here's what we think. Here's our vision for the future. Here's our product. Here's how our product matches our vision. Here's where our product's going. Here's why you should use our product, right? I went looking through my own portfolio and I was like, a lot of these companies that died never really launched. I was like fearful of that in that period. And I said to Bobby something along the lines of like, what's the plan for telling the world about this? Like, I mean, simply having a better Excel, you could find yourself just sitting at the bar wondering why is no one paying attention? You know, like what's the actual plan for putting yourself out there and being in great shape? He talked through some aspects of marketing, you know, branding, positioning, like Google Sheets is over here, Microsoft Excel's over there, blah, blah. And I was like, right, but like, you probably need to tell people that like hundreds of times. Yeah. And I think I wrote maybe like some like 90 or 95 of the first 100 blog posts on Intercom. And if I'm honest, I always felt that Bobby and to some degree Ben, his co-founder, never really gave me any street cred for that, you know. But so some of this was like eat some greens. But you have to commit to tell the world everything you stand for, your product, what it is, what it does, how it's used, who uses it, why they use it.
And the most important thing I'd say is actually you're not as important as you think, and so don't worry actually if it's not perfect.
Well, totally,
Just
and
give it the
like,
fuck out.
and your thinking will evolve, and that means that if something I wrote in 2013 is no longer what I think today, fine. I don't think anyone thinks anything like 10 years prior is like admissible in court or whatever, So yeah, no, it was like, please guarantee me that you're going to lay it all out there and tell the world why they should use equals. That's ultimately what the ask was.
Can I ask you, we both like Johnny a lot. Do you have any lessons from Hopin? Ophelia or someone? Love Ophelia. Always with a good question.
They might have realized earlier that the world was going to return to a lot more like normality. And I think they did smart work with, like, say, StreamYard and in that acquisition. I suspect when you have like an existential like crisis along the lines of, hey, it turns out everyone's just going back to real world conferences and they don't even want to live stream it that much. There's a lot of temptation to like push back against that and hedge against it, just be like, oh no, surely they will, or there might be another pandemic, you never know, or whatever. Sometimes it's you just need to say, hey, look, the thing we thought was true is no longer true, and we now need to reorient the entire company to get ready for the new truth. Like, I think StreamYard and that move was that generally part of that. So like, I don't, that's how I saw it as an outsider. I was like, they had to like ultimately pivot to like live streaming a lot quicker, and they did. They made a great acquisition. Here's a shit lesson that's just true, right? If you're in the weirdest capital market in history and everyone's telling you to like raise billions of dollars at like ridiculous valuations, don't do it. Like, it's a weird lesson, right? Like, it's a hard thing. Like,
I didn't think don't do it, actually.
No, well then, like,
I think for the investors, like, what was the lesson for me? Like, actually, regardless of how well the company's doing, regardless of trajectory, who's joining rounds, if you are in early enough and the prices get high enough, just take some off the table.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable.
And actually be much more active around it. Yeah. Like, be a real manager of your portfolio, not a passive investor.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think certainly that's for founders who occasionally write checks, I think that's probably the bigger lesson that will emerge from 2019 through 23 or whatever. Like,
and it's fine to say, well, I'm a founder by day, but if it's millions of dollars back to you, it's worth your time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Final one for you, my friend.
Okay.
Where's Des in 10 years? And where's Intercom in 10 years? Has Intercom killed Zendesk? I
would hope that's like, I think Zendesk will have their own fate. I don't think it's not incumbent upon us to do anything to them. I think Intercom, we want to be like the primary support solution for internet businesses. Like, that's what we want to be. I hope that there's either less intensity or I found a role in the company that requires less intensity, because I don't see myself as a 52-year-old being able to do what I do today. And even if I look at myself today versus like when I was, say, 30 when we started or whatever, like, generally, like, there was, I mean, I wasn't in this healthy shape or whatever, but like there was definitely more energy and more like 9 a.m. till 2 a.m. type energy, right? Like, that's, in the world post kids and all that sort of stuff. And then just like the natural laws of aging, that has definitely shrank a bit. Like, I'm now probably working closer to a normal working day. So yeah, I hope whoever has my position, if it's not me, is able to do it. Or if it's me, I hope it doesn't need the like 9 to 9 energy.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for joining me. I love our conversations. You've been amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.